And good afternoon. Welcome to Helping Seniors of Brevard for this Wednesday afternoon. I'm John Harper, and let's get right to the show as I introduce the host of the show and the executive director of Helping Seniors of Brevard. Here's Kerry Fink.
Thank you, John Harper. It's always great to be here on a Wednesday at lunchtime, 12 noon, right here on 90.3 FM WEJF radio, and also for those listening online at WEJF.net, and for the growing family of listeners that find us as a podcast, particularly those who search out by topic later and say, I want to learn something specific. Helping Seniors Radio is wherever you'll find a podcast. So you can look at Apple iTunes, you can look at Spotify, Amazon, really doesn't matter, iHeartRadio. Look for Helping Seniors of Brevard there. But thank you for joining us on the radio today. Today is Wednesday. It's June the 14th. Now, I want to remind you of something very, very important that's coming up tomorrow. It's happening on the 15th, and it is, in fact, the World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. It's an annual thing, happens really on the 15th day of June, literally year after year, but it's trying to do its best to bring attention to the situations that seniors often very unfairly find themselves in. And so actually tomorrow between 9 and noon, so we're talking about Thursday, June 15th, we're all going to be at the Space Coast Health Foundation right there on US 1 in Rockledge, because they're putting together a World Elder Abuse Awareness Day community event. Ruth Rhodes, who is a elder law attorney here in our community, she actually serves on the board of directors of Helping Seniors of Brevard. She's one of the keynote speakers. She's going to be talking about financial exploitation. So we're going to be out there. A lot of different folks are going to be out there, but it's really an important time to learn how to make sure that you are not the victim of financial exploitation. And Ruth, from her position and expertise, is really going to be I think it's going to be a really illuminating talk, because there is such a challenge to protect our seniors, both physically, but oftentimes it's a financial challenge. And one of the shocking statistics is that oftentimes the financial exploitation happens within a family through a setting where somebody probably should have known better, or maybe a mistake was made in how things were set up. So it's an important event, World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. We're going to be there with our friends from Brevard Alzheimer's Foundation. The Brevard Commission on Aging is putting this together. Helping Seniors, our whole team is going to be there. Big event tomorrow in Rockledge at the Space Coast Health Foundation. You can always call Nancy on our Helping Seniors phone number at 321-473-7770. And we'll be happy to get you registered. They want you to RSVP, so we make sure that we save a place for you. So with that, let me introduce our guest, none other than Dr. Lee Sheldon. How are you today?
Hey, Kerry. Good to be with you as always. And, what a great time to be living in Brevard County with no smoke overhead. Nice, sunny, bright. We have nothing but good and warm weather to look forward to, a great place to live. Couldn't be better.
It is. Brevard County is really the best of the best. And, we were just sharing before we went on the air that I guess our friends in Florida today do this thing every year. They call the best of the best. I know for you guys, Dr. Lee Sheldon, it's kind of like old news, because you guys are always voted best of the best. Sheldon and Furtado, PLLC. How many years running has that been for you guys historically?
10 years in a row.
Wow. And I think that's a tremendous thing. I also noticed that another Helping Seniors partner, the law office of Amy B. Van Falsen, also, I think last year won, I don't know how many years in a row, but I love seeing organizations that strive for excellence. And I'm so happy and excited to announce that little old Helping Seniors of Brevard made the cut. We're at least on the nomination list. So if you participate in that, I think they say you can vote like once per day now until June 24th. But as they say politically, we would like to throw our hat in the ring and have you consider us for your favorite nonprofit charity. You just go to services and you'll see nonprofit charity organizations, and you can hunt down Helping Seniors and click a vote. And just let people know that you appreciate the work we do. And Dr. Sheldon, so we're excited about that. That's a big deal for us as a little organization that can.
It's a thrill to get that kind of recognition. And you're right. The only way you get that kind of recognition is to vote. If you subscribe to Florida Today, then you can then you'll get the link automatically on in your email. If you can still vote, however, if you don't subscribe to Florida Today, and I would imagine you would go to Florida Today, to their website, and it will find a place for you to vote. As a matter of fact, while we're talking, I'm going to go to Florida Today and just see how you would do that. So you talk about dentistry, I'll talk about Florida Today.
Okay, I'll do my best, Dr. Sheldon here. But so I'm happy to say that our show today is called My Criteria for Tooth Extraction. But Dr. Sheldon, I can tell you we're already in trouble because you don't want to hear that from me. But it's a serious question, and we're really going to talk a little bit about this seriously because I remember a time when my wife walked into me and she said, I just want to take all my teeth out. They hurt so bad. I'm having so many problems. And thank God that we got to somebody with sense who said, that's not the correct solution for you right now. And Dr. Sheldon, we've done TV shows along the way. We've talked about different things where you have been up front and you said, listen, I think oftentimes too many teeth are being extracted. And I thought that's an interesting comment to come from somebody who's in the business of extracting teeth where it's needed.
Yes, we do for a living. We extract teeth and put in dental implants, and I'm saying way too many teeth are being extracted. Shame on me. I think business is going to go down, and we'll never be able to practice again in Brevard County if I keep on taking that stand. But guess what? We've only been in practice for 43 years. You never can tell what's going to happen in year 44, but so far we're doing okay.
That's good.
And by the way, I've got the email, with a web address. You ready?
Oh, good.
Okay. So we go to floridatoday.gannett-contests, GANNETCONTESTS.com.
Good. And while you're there, you can certainly vote for, I already put my vote in for Solid Bite because I think what we're going to talk about is not only helpful to the public at large. This is just good information, and it's really, I think, symbolic, Dr. Sheldon, of how you really, in addition to running a dental practice with excellence, you run it in a way that literally dental practices all over the country seek you guys out to consult with and ask them for the best way to organize their business practices so that they're really serving the customers well. But not only that, as you said, 43 years worth of experience. I've jokingly called you the grandfather of dental implants to begin with. But the other thing that I think is so good about what you do, Dr. Sheldon, is you're always out in the forefront of the community educating. You want people to understand what's going on in their mouth. That's why you wrote the dental guide that you did, and the Ultimate Mouth Manual, I believe is what it's called. But you've always been on this campaign of educating us so that when we run into something, we don't just immediately fall into a trap. Maybe we saw an ad on TV that says, oh, you can get teeth in a day or something like that. And we don't really understand that we're making lifetime decisions, which is why I think today's show, where we're going to talk about criteria for tooth extraction, is so important, because I guess once you pluck it out, you surely can't easily put it back in, right?
You can't, and sometimes it's less predictable to put something back in, including a dental implant. Again, I do dental implants for a living. Dental implants are not foolproof either. They have very much to do, but the success has very much to do with the skill as well as the judgment of the person putting it in. There are certain criteria that we have. It isn't just we take a dental implant off the shelf and we put it in the wall and everything's okay. So there are a lot of considerations here which have very much to do with skill and with judgment. And I'll take the judgment category specifically. So I'll give you an example of something that just happened today, Kerry. As you said, I do consult and I do business consulting, but what gives me, business consulting is business consulting. Principles of business are pretty much the same whether you own a computer company or whether you own a dental office. It's the same thing. And so, yeah, we've acquired some expertise. I did some training in that. And Danielle is really, really good. Danielle, who's our office manager, and she goes out, and she'll be going out on the road to Delaware on Monday. And so, yeah, we've got that level of expertise. But the fun part of it for me, particularly when I haven't done dental treatment in, to any significant degree in over 8 years, is to be able to discuss with the doctors that I work with what I would do in a particular situation. Mm-hmm. So I don't need to describe the situation in detail. In fact, I couldn't. But a doctor that I consult with and I've been working with for quite some time shows me today some X-rays, because we do Zoom consultations, and he shows me some X-rays and he shows me the treatment plan that he has, which is to extract the tooth and to replace it with a dental implant, which, given the situation, would be a very, very complex surgical procedure to do. It would be difficult. So he wanted to check with me to see what I would do. And I looked at it and I said, this is a relatively rare consideration. The problem this patient has is a relatively rare problem. And while you could treat it that way, understand we've got this risk, this risk, this risk, this risk, and this risk, which he knew about. Mm-hmm. I said, there is a possibility of saving the tooth, and I would do it this way, with a root canal and with a certain amount of surgical treatment to save the tooth. He said, I've never heard of that before. So, well, let me give you a reference. And so I went to the National Library of Medicine, and I gave him a reference on the technique that we're talking about that was documented by a root canal specialist in like 1980, 1981, 1982. And so now this patient will have the opportunity of, it's certainly not a risk-free procedure that I'm talking about, but if we're comparing relative risks, extracting the tooth and trying to replace it with a dental implant versus trying to save the tooth, and understand, talking to the patient, we're in this together. This is a severe and a rare circumstance, but I think we have a decent chance, certainly better than 50-50 and probably close to 70% chance of saving the tooth. Would you like to do it this way? Certainly the dentist that I talked to was all ears. He said, I didn't realize we could do it that way. I didn't have that. And then as soon as we got offline, I sent him the article. I said, here's the article. Here's what we go by. Why do I talk about this? Because there are judgment calls, and our judgment calls is based on our experience, our knowledge of the literature, and what's worked for us and what hasn't worked for us. So when somebody tells you you need a tooth extracted, what is the depth of experience in the diseases that are present on the tooth that leads you to believe that the only solution is an extraction? And what would we have to do to save the tooth? Because I can tell you, Kerry, unless the tooth is really broken off way below the gum line, you can save any tooth.
Wow.
You can save any tooth. But then the question is one of predictability. Mm-hmm. So when you hear things like, well, this tooth has too much decay, or this tooth has severe periodontal disease, we can't do anything about it, and particularly when it's not even bothering the patient, that's something where we just, sit back, let's take a deep breath and say, well, what do you mean by we can't extract the tooth, or we can't save the tooth? What would it require to save the tooth? Right. And you talked about it, and you brought it out, and I'm not saying it doesn't qualify for this, but you were talking about, in essence, elder abuse.
Oh, wow.
Elder abuse is not just abuse by commission. In other words, you commit you commit a problem that never should have been done from a legal standpoint, but it also can be from omission. Wow. I don't know enough to be able to tell you what it would take to save a tooth. And it brings us back to the old, and I keep on saying it, if there's a doubt, see a specialist. There's a specialist in every disease in dentistry, because the specialist has some expertise. And by the way, not all specialists might save the teeth that I saved. Maybe they wouldn't. Maybe I saved too many teeth. Maybe I saved not enough teeth. But at least there is some background, some time, time in studying, time in practicing, and some skill and some judgment, which allows me to make a decision to be able to help a person save their teeth. I can't tell you the number of times over my career that people came into my office saying, I've been told that I need all my teeth extracted and I need to have dentures. And I see these patients 30 years later, and they still have all their teeth.
Wow.
So understand, just because somebody says you need a tooth extracted, that has to do sometimes with, that individual, and may not be the only treatment that's available for that tooth.
See, I would really like to riff for just a minute on that word that you used earlier when you said it was a judgment call. Because one of the goals, as you know, you helped Joe get Helping Seniors of Brevard rolling. In fact, you helped him back in the Brevard Alzheimer's Day. So Joe's passion has always been about this thing he calls getting an aging plan. And what he means by that is we got to get the information that helps us make the best quality decisions as we get older. And I was thinking about this because as we've gone along, we keep saying, we use a euphemism for that these days. We say, well, let's help you get your ducks in a row so that you're making your plan. And maybe we feel like it's a little less intimidating than sounding like, I've got to do a report or a plan or something like that. But it's the same idea. You got to think about these things ahead of time. But Dr. Sheldon, as we go along, the thing that becomes equally important in that thing about putting together a plan or getting your ducks in a row, whatever you want to call it, is we always say, don't try this on your own, because the value of experience really seems to be so important. Every time, Dr. Sheldon, I sit down with like Bill Johnson, another longtime partner, board certified elder law attorney, he always kind of shakes his head and rolls his eyes. He said, I can't tell you how many times people come in my office, they've been online, they're trying to figure out, they ran some paperwork that they thought was going to work for them in a particular situation. Now something dreadful has happened, and that paperwork is basically worthless. And now he's got to work like 3 times as hard to try to undo the damage that's already been done. Whereas the point is, if you go to somebody, and by the way, let me just add this. Sometimes Bill isn't talking about people who did this themselves. He's talking about people who sometimes occasionally went to an attorney who might be very good in one area, but doesn't know elder law. They say, well, I use this guy for this, so I had him do that. And then they're still in trouble. So the point is, you've really got to find somebody that you know and trust to be able to lead and guide you. And Dr. Sheldon, where I want to bring this back to our conversation today is when you're talking about it being a judgment call, I remember something a comedian once said. He said, someplace in the world today, by process of elimination, is the world's worst doctor. And what will really scare you is he has appointments with patients today. And I started laughing about it, but I said, Dr. Sheldon, that's one of the things that is difficult for us as consumers is how do we know when we're finding somebody who can really help us make the good judgment calls on this? And I'm going to at least postulate one part of this saying that, I've learned because of your experience as a periodontist and you look below the teeth, that gives you a vantage point maybe a lot of times that other practitioners don't even think in those dimensions.
It may be, but let's assume the use of a periodontal probe, which everybody knows, or not many people know. You're using a probe as a measuring device to go down below the gum line and see how much bone support has been lost from a tooth. Mm-hmm. The two different people can use that probe, sometimes can, by the way, obtain 2 different results. But more importantly, let's assume they are the same result. Let's assume I probe and I get a 9-millimeter pocket, which means you've got 3 millimeters for gum tissue, and that means 6 millimeters of bone loss. So the person next to me, or another person, another dentist, would measure a 9-millimeter pocket and might say, that tooth needs to come out. There's way too much periodontal disease. I would measure that same 9-millimeter pocket, and I would say, let's take a saliva sample. Let's find out what bacteria is growing there. Let's send that saliva sample out to the laboratory to find out which bacteria it is, because some bacteria are more aggressive than others. In the meantime, I feel some roughness on the root surface, and I know that's hard bacteria. We talked about fractured calculus probably over a year ago. Hard bacteria is stuck to the root. I think if we get that bacteria neutralized and remove that calculus, that everything's going to heal up, and 9 times out of 10 it will.
Wow.
But two different people are measuring that same pocket and would come to 2 different conclusions.
And that part is really challenging because what we want to do, I guess, as consumers, as we're thinking about these things, we don't want to do this on our own. I always thought that it really makes sense to find somebody, and I guess you need to do it by reputation. We're joking about the best of the best awards and things like that a little bit earlier, but it really makes sense to try to identify a practice that has the experience and those multi-levels of experience to be able to make sure that you're making those best judgment calls in that. That's the thing that is kind of like my takeaway, if you will, from the first part of the show. Am I saying that the right way, Dr. Sheldon?
I think that's right, but we're designing a new kitchen right now. Well, again, we've had one designer who we thought was good, and we still think he's good. But then we sent the same kitchen to another designer, and the designer came up with a better idea than the first one did, and both are qualified.
Wow.
So,
wow.
But I don't think it just applies to dentistry or medicine or to any individual discipline. There are the best people around, and the mistake that people make is they say, if I'm going to the best, it's going to be too expensive. And the real answer to that is, if I'm going to the best, maybe I'm going to get it done right, or I'm going to get it diagnosed better or done well the first time.
Wow.
The most expensive dentistry is the dentistry that has to be redone.
Wow. See, thank you for saying that, because going back to my elder law attorney, Bill Johnson example, that's usually what happens. Somebody thought, well, I'm smart. I can search this out online. I can write the right form, and I'll have saved, that money that I would have spent on the attorney. And then the problem is when that piece of paper needs to be in play and it doesn't work. Now it's become, instead of a couple of zeros, it's become multiple zeros at the end of what it's going to take to resolve that problem. And I kind of hear you speaking in that same sort of language. You really can't afford, or doesn't make sense. It's certainly not practical if you're going in the wrong direction on dental treatment and maybe pulling teeth that don't need to be pulled, or skipping over teeth that are just going to be a problem later on.
Kerry, I can take it even farther than that. We probably have to go to break, do we? Or do
We have just about 2 minutes.
All right, so 2 minutes. I go well beyond dental care, and I have for years. What's the number 3 cause of death in the United States? Okay, so I'll give you number one. Number 1 is heart disease. Number 2 is cancer. What's the number 3 cause of death in the United States?
Wow.
Any guess?
I was going to say heart disease, but you already said it.
All right, so we gave you number 1, number 2. The third leading cause of death in the United States is properly prescribed pharmaceutical medicine.
Wow.
So I'm not just taking it from the standpoint of dentistry.
Right.
Look at everything. If we've got, I'm reading a book by Joel Fuhrman right now, Fuhrman. It's about a 10-year-old book. It's on nutrition. If you really want to look at sources of disease, particularly cancer and heart disease, that's very much lifestyle oriented, and we are accustomed to taking a pill for that. We're accustomed to taking a pill for osteoporosis, a pill for cholesterol. You name the disease, there's a pill for it. Let's go back to the lifestyles that we've adopted that require us to need that pill, and how much better could we do if we just adopted a proper lifestyle? We wouldn't need those, and frankly, the pills probably are going to help us last as long as adopting the appropriate lifestyle. And the lifestyle doesn't have to be that consuming, but we've gotten the idea that whatever we think, moderation, going to fast food restaurant 3 days a week instead of 7 days a week, that's moderation now. Let's get back to decent lifestyles, and let's understand what the third leading cause of death is. Properly prescribed drugs, medication.
Incredible. We're talking with Dr. Lee Sheldon of Sheldon and Furtado.
So, by the way, this is probably my last show. I'm probably going to be taken off the air now.
No, I don't think so. We value everything you have to share too much. So we're talking with Dr. Lee Sheldon of Solid Bite, Sheldon and Furtado. We're going to be back on the second half of the Helping Seniors radio show, and we're going to continue our dialogue about Dr. Sheldon's criteria for tooth extraction. See you there.
And it's Wednesday afternoon. You're listening to Helping Seniors of Brevard with your host, Kerry Fink. Kerry is also the Executive Director of Helping Seniors of Brevard, and he has with him a very special guest, a good friend of the organization for many years, and that is none other than Dr. Lee Sheldon. But right now, let's get back to the more of the show, and here once again is Kerry Fink.
Thank you, John Harper. And again, it's just always a pleasure to continue the lunch hour going on Wednesdays right here on 90.3 FM, WEJF, and online at WEJF.net. And those who enjoy this as a podcast later. And we really are having a good and entertaining and I think informative discussion about criteria for tooth extraction. Because Dr. Sheldon, when we were talking about this at the opening of the show, I said, you're kind of famous for coming up with these kind of provocative titles for shows, like Are Too Many Teeth Being Extracted, which is not something you would necessarily expect to hear from a dentist, particularly one who is really an expert at dental implants and things like that. And yet, we spent a lot of time in the first part of the show, and I want to encourage you, if you didn't get to hear it, the beautiful thing about the podcast is, or you can go to our YouTube channel or Helping Seniors on Facebook page, or even our website at helpingseniorsofbrevard.org. You can pull this program back up, catch what you might have missed in the first part, because we really spent a lot of time talking about how important the judgment call aspect of making a tooth extraction call really is. And Dr. Sheldon, as we get into the second part of the show, really want to talk, because you had been kind enough to put together like I'd call it like a general punch list. Like, this is maybe when you do when we would say probably the tooth ought to come out, and here's where it maybe might be okay to let it ride.
Yeah, so let's take the bottom of the list first, okay? Let's talk about, because I've only given really one where it says, here's when teeth often don't need to be extracted. And the first one is, you're told you have severe periodontal disease, which will only worsen. Let's get the teeth out now before you lose so much bone support you can't do a dental implant.
Wow.
Or let's get the teeth out now to prevent you from losing so much bone support that you can't support a denture. That's totally false. Absolutely false. Nothing to support that statement whatsoever. So let's assume that you're told you have severe periodontal disease. Now, obviously, I'm going to pick that first because I'm a periodontist and I see that every day. You have severe periodontal disease, and by the way, it's not bothering you. You as the patient is not bothering you. And you're told you need those teeth taken out, get to a periodontist right away. Don't accept that opinion. Go to a periodontist who knows what you can do with periodontal disease and what you can do to help treat periodontal disease, and that will cost you less money than it would cost you to extract the teeth, put in a denture, and you'll have your teeth. Now, will that happen for everybody? No. But if you're told you need all your teeth out due to periodontal disease, hightail it to a periodontist. Chances are very, very good you can save those teeth. That's a big one. That's a big one. Because the assumption is that you've lost bone support. That's only going to get worse. You can't treat periodontal disease. And I have a number of patients who, once they had the infection under control, we grew bone support around the teeth without even doing surgery. Essentially, we took care of the infection around the teeth, and the bone grew back as a result. It's not commonly known. So that's number one. Number two, don't necessarily believe the idea that a dental implant is better than a natural tooth. A natural tooth has a root. The root is surrounded by a ligament, and a ligament attaches that to bone. If you have a viable natural tooth, and by the way, this is a judgment call because we take out plenty of teeth and do dental implants. Don't get me wrong. You can't save, it may not be appropriate to save every tooth. But if you have a good foundation to work with, let's at least think about what we can do to build or repair that foundation and what it would cost and what the judgment call would be there in terms of long-term longevity versus extracting the tooth and doing a dental implant. There are some times that I'll say, hey, it's going to require this, and this is going to require 4 different procedures to get that tooth good. And even when it is, it's so weak that I'm not sure it's going to last very long. Okay, I think in this case, we ought to do a dental implant. But then there are plenty of cases where the tooth is fractured partially below the gum line or something like that. And they say, all we have to do is a minor gum tissue procedure here to remove some of the gum and bone support for part of the tooth, and we can restore this tooth properly, and you don't need a dental implant. So understand that dental implants are not the panacea that even we as dentists thought. Boy, in the 1980s, 1990s, we thought dental implants were better than natural teeth. We did. All of us did. Even the people who are smarter than I am. I'm not that smart. And we thought the dental implants were it. And now we've been looking at dental implants because the modern era of dental implants started in 1982. We got 41 years of data now, and we can see what dental implants do. They're not as predictable as natural teeth if we have a decent natural tooth to work with.
See, that's one of the things that I remember that we've talked about in the past on both TV and radio, because I thought that was pretty interesting that you would bring that up as a topic that maybe I think we did a show. This goes back a number of years where you titled a TV show in the Helping Seniors Library called "Why Dental Implants Are Not Always the Best," and I thought that was really interesting that you would be willing to title a show like that, considering that you guys are really leading the market in terms of having innovated it, but also keeping it state of the art.
Yeah, you're right. And I have this innate desire to be controversial. But listen, I mean, controversy comes with the territory, particularly when you're speaking against what may be somebody else's opinion. And then the question is, are you willing to express that opinion or not? And then the second is, can you back up that opinion? Well, I think we've been around long enough that we can pretty much I'm not perfect, but we can back up a lot of opinions that may be different from what the norm may be.
Yeah, and not only that, Dr. Sheldon, but I was going to say, too, that I think it really does go back to the heart of the case. When we're talking about judgment call as being such a critical indicator for making sure you make the right decision about a tooth extraction, you need to know that the people that you're looking to for advice really have that broad spectrum of understanding. And I know that you also listed in that little worksheet that we were talking about ahead of the show a number of cases where maybe the tooth should be extracted. Am I saying it's like there was this thing here. It said the tooth is causing a bone infection. Such a tooth can often be saved with a well-done root canal. That would solve the infection. But if you choose not to do the root canal, the tooth would need to be extracted to resolve the infection.
Exactly right. We start to get infections. Let's think about some of the back teeth on the upper, okay, some of the back upper teeth. Those roots are right adjacent to the sinus. And so I see it nearly every week where a tooth has been retained, a root canal wasn't done, it wasn't bothering the patient. And I come in and I look at it with a CT scan, and the tooth and the infection from the root canal, from the dead nerve on the inside of the tooth, and that's what requires a root canal, that's blown a hole in the sinus. That's more common than you might think. And so then the question is not one of saving the tooth. It may be saving the tooth, but it becomes a health problem, not just a dental problem of saving the tooth. Now we've put other structures at risk as a result of having a tooth like that, and it's totally asymptomatic. The patient can't feel it. There's no swelling. There's no nothing. It's just there. So, still, a tooth like that can be saved, and we'll refer the patient to an endodontist, a root canal specialist, in order to be able to take care of that tooth. But we can't refer the patient to the endodontist unless we look at the tooth as dentists and say, all right, let's assume the root canal is done, and the root canal is successful, and the infection is eliminated as a result of the root canal. The next question is, can we restore the tooth? Can we make that tooth whole again? Can we put a crown on it, which means, is there enough viable tooth structure for us to crown? And so that's what I'm thinking about. It's obvious to me that the patient has an infection and the root canal needs to be done. But before I send the patient over to the endodontist, I say, all right, if we send over to the endodontist, what is the requirement in order to be able to make this tooth whole again? And so then I can tell the patient, all right, the root canal is going to cost this. The requiring the tooth to become whole again is going to cost that. Are you prepared for that entire expense? Because if you're not, let's take out the tooth.
Right. And then that part of the where you need that help in making the right call about these things, because if you don't know what the roadway in front of you looks like, you like you said, you might be making a decision and you're just going to be revisiting that decision in a certain period of time. But if you could resolve the situation, you could get many, many good years ahead without other problems, right?
It's true. And unfortunately, budgets come into this. Mm-hmm. And so, and it doesn't mean that everybody shouldn't be given the opportunity for the best care possible, but the best care possible on saving a tooth like that, it may cost $5,000 to save the tooth. If it's going to cost $5,000 to save the tooth, all right, are you prepared for that? And more importantly, if it costs $5,000 to save the tooth, what else is going on in the rest of your mouth that's going to require attention? And what's the whole budget going to be before we spend a lot of money on one tooth? It may not make sense to spend a lot of money on one tooth. So that's also the judgment. That's why it's very difficult for me to see a patient and look at a patient and just look at one tooth. I've got to look at the entire situation and be able to say, hey, listen, in order to be able to restore your mouth, this is going to cost X amount of dollars. Are you prepared for that if we save this one tooth? If not, you may spend that $5,000 might be more valuable for the other 14 teeth than it would be saved for saving this one. So there all of those discussions that is part of the aging plan, if you will, that Joe talks about getting your ducks in a row. Let's make sure every duck is in the row before we invest too much on one tooth and can't afford to do anything to save the rest of the teeth. So there's more than just a single tooth that we're thinking about when we're looking at that tooth. We have to look at the entire mouth because that's what the patient smiles and chews with.
As you're talking about that, I keep coming back to, I know you used to call it, I don't know if it's still called the same thing, Solid Bite Gives Back, but it's a program that actually helps us as a charity. I'm talking about helping seniors, because we can only go as far as your generosity will allow us to do. And so that's why we're always hawking the Helping Seniors car raffle tickets. That's our big fundraiser. We do the Helping Seniors Travel Club cruises and things like that. But Dr. Sheldon, one of the most innovative programs I think you came up with that is a good fundraiser for us as a charity organization. But the reality is it really does this planning that you're talking about, because I remember you explaining the frustration that you would otherwise have seeing a new patient about just this thing. Because usually I guess we'd wander in the dentist's office going, this tooth hurts, make it stop. But then we're probably overlooking a lot of other problems that we don't even really know are there. And so I remember you saying that you really feel like you need to have a real comprehensive dental evaluation with a person that really costs your office like $500-600 if you're going to do it right, but then you really understand what's going on in the patient's mouth. But most times people say, well, that's not what I came in for. I have one thing that's going on. And so you as the doctor are then you wouldn't have everything you need to have to make the right diagnosis, and the patient isn't really getting the full benefit of your experience and knowledge because you can only be as good as the tools that you're given to work with. And I think that's why you put together that program, Solid Bite Gives Back, so that you will invest into the community and that patient with that full time so that you really can look at the whole picture and not just like, oh, there's a problem on this one tooth.
It's true. And Solid Bite Gives Back has been a tremendous program for us and for patients and as well as the charities, Helping Seniors of Brevard being one of those charities. And it was a decision. It was one of those decisions, Kerry, how you make decisions and you say, all right, here's the solution. I have no idea if this will ever work or not. Let's do this and see if it's going to work. But the reason I did it to begin with is because dental examinations, with the amount of time that I spend, was just becoming too expensive if I was going to spend the time that I needed to spend in order to be able to do what I wanted to do. So
Sure.
if a patient has spent $500, $600, they're going to think before they come in to see me, because that's an awful lot of money to spend to just find out what I think. And so we
Right.
put in the charitable giving campaign, which has become Solid by Gives Back, and say, all right, donate $50 to Helping Seniors of Brevard. I'll do the full examination, and that way at least you can find out what I'm thinking or the different options that you have for your full mouth. And therefore, it doesn't restrict me, because the patient says, hey, I'm only paying $50. Do whatever you want, doc. I only want you to talk about this one tooth, but do whatever you want. And then I can put that tooth in perspective against the other 27 or 31 teeth that are in the mouth, or fewer, and say, all right, here's a perspective I've got. It may be worthwhile to do this, it may not be worthwhile to do that, and we put together the entire plan. I can't see a patient unless I can do an entire plan, because the mouth is the mouth. It isn't just tooth by tooth. Patients may have one opinion, but frankly, my opinion is better than theirs, is because I know what I'm talking about.
Well, it goes back to the don't try this on your own.
Exactly right.
I heard somebody the other day say, well, you wouldn't go on YouTube to look up a video to figure out how to do, something crazy medically, but people, we just have this tendency, we're trying to think of the maybe the easier way out or the most cost-effective way out. But I love how you really pulled that together for making a better community out of Solid Bite, because you really are helping. And while obviously I advocate you should choose Helping Seniors, I do know that you guys help a lot of other very worthy charities in the community. So the patient could come in from any door frame on that, but say, I really want to get this quality evaluation. But it gives you, as the professional in your office, a real understanding of what the big picture is for that patient. And it really gives the patient not only a good feeling for helping a nonprofit like us, Helping Seniors of Brevard, in our area, but they get real valuable information for a fraction of what it really probably costs your dental office to get all that together.
Yeah, and of course, from a business standpoint, just to be totally upfront, I know that a certain number of patients are going to accept treatment, so we're going to do fine. But it's going to be far worse if the patient has spent too much money and therefore doesn't see me for the evaluation. So at least I can give you my perspective. Now, you may not like my perspective. Usually, I'll give you one or two other plans that there are lesser plans than the ideal. I'll come up with something with different plans that will be predictable. But, it's thinking the entire case through before you make those decisions. Sometimes, by the way, I need opinions of other specialists before I really know what we want to do. It's so gratifying that we have some good specialists in right here in Brevard County, and that will refer to another periodontist, to an orthodontist, or I'll refer to an endodontist, and then we get together online. We do a Zoom call, which is far better than it was before we had Zoom, and we get together and say, all right, what can you do? What can you do? What can you do? And the doctors sit down together and work out the treatment plan together. So that's a lot of fun, and it gives the patient the opportunities of looking at what all the disciplines can do in order to be able to solve a particular problem.
I was thinking about that because you had mentioned that at the beginning of the show, how now with the technology, you're able to help offices, literally all over the United States, and I guess presumably even the world. But even I've seen that in your own office, because you have Dr. Matthew Sheldon, who's a great general dentist, and then you have Dr. Sheldon Furtado, who's an expert periodontist like yourself. And I've seen you guys huddle together to make sure that, as you're talking through a case for a patient, that it's really gonna make the difference and be the correct application for that particular situation.
That's what we do every Tuesday at 4 p.m.
Yeah. So
every Tuesday we're meeting and talking about patients. Now, not everybody requires the group meeting, but when there are questions, certainly I want to know what Michelle can do for the patient. I want to know what Matthew can do before we make the final decision. Now, 90 to 95% of the time, I know what can be done. But in some areas where I have a question, and I'm the senior guy, I probably have more experience than most people do. I've got my own considerations, but I haven't done the surgery in over 8 years, and so I don't know exactly what Michelle can do. Matthew's got some treatment techniques for badly carious and badly decayed teeth that I never applied in my practice. I'm not a restorative dentist. And so on somebody who has a lot of decay, there are ways in which we can apply some medications to the tooth in order to be able to stop the decay and see if that decay will continue after we've done that or not before we invest a lot of money in the tooth. There are a lot of things that we could do on a diagnostic and even a preventive basis before we decide on a major investment on a tooth, particularly when we're not sure.
Even as you were saying that, I got to thinking, just as you were talking about that, with Dr. Matt Sheldon, I had the opportunity of doing a TV show, a Helping Seniors TV show, together with him about cosmetic dentistry, and I was really thinking about how broad the spectrum of things and services you guys are able to do. But let me just kind of like cap it by saying, like, if somebody says, okay, I heard you guys talking about this Solid Bite Gives Back, that looks like a pretty good approach to this. If somebody wants more information, maybe they want to see how it could work for them or whatever, how would they reach you?
Yeah, just call the office, 321-259-8000, and say you heard me talk, Kerry and me talk about dental treatment on Helping Seniors of Brevard Radio on WEJF, or however you want to say it, or I want the Helping Seniors of Brevard special, and any one of our staff members who answer the phone will know exactly what to do and how to help you set up that initial appointment, which will be about a 2-hour appointment.
Yeah, and you guys have a great website too, solidbite.com. It's really I think you've got a lot of resources there, and it's a great place to kind of, like, if you don't know the practice, you can also kind of see who you guys are, what you do, and all that kind of thing. But I still always love pushing people towards that great book you put out, the Ultimate
Mouth Manual. Yeah. I wrote that. I wrote that about 6 years ago. So it's becoming a little bit dated, but once you're on our list, I'm creating these same essays that we're publishing in Helping Seniors of Brevard on the website, and it goes into Senior Scene magazine. Those same essays go to all of the patients on our list, so they can see what our current thinking is about a number of different problems.
Yeah, because this very conversation we're having on the radio ends up going into the Helping Seniors newsletter, which is those yellow pages, the center section of Senior Scene magazine. So speaking of Helping Seniors, and mentioned it at the bottom of the hour before we get out of this hour, I wanted to make sure that everybody knew we are now like just about 3.5 months away from the Helping Seniors car raffle. It all happens October 7th. 2023 at Mark Pylock's amazing American Muscle Car Museum. And they're saying, Dr. Sheldon, this could be the last year for the Dodge Challenger. And now they're saying it could be the last year for the Chevy Camaro. Those are two of the cars that come from AJ's fine family of dealerships. I mean, you could pick a Mazda Miata, you could pick a Kia Sportage, or even now a Mitsubishi Outlander. It's your choice when you win. But Dr. Sheldon, they're saying this could be it for the Dodge Challenger and the Chevy Camaro. So
I'm seeing that with my car as well. They don't make it anymore. I won't mention it because it's not part of this. It isn't part of this charity, but I can't get my car anymore either. So yes, Dodge Challenger, if you want to get it this year, get the Camaro this year.
And it's really pretty simple, right? One ticket is a $25 donation. 5 tickets is a $100 donation. $100 donation. And what a great opportunity that is, because each ticket, you don't have to be present to win. But if you get your tickets, each ticket also serves as your admit one to the great night that Mark Pylock throws at his museum there, Saturday, October 7th, 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. You really want to be there. And it's just a great night to be there. Somebody goes home in a brand new car, it might as well be you, which is why you got to be in it to win it. So, Dr. Sheldon, you guys have tickets at your office right there on Sarno Road.
We have tickets at our office at 2223 Sarno Road. So come on in. You don't have to see us as a patient. And by the way, if you think, I've already seen Mark Pylock's museum, I don't have to go back again. No. He changes his cars. It's a brand new experience each time you go in.
Oh my goodness. Yes, it is. And I'm still amazed at how many people don't really know it's right. What a great thing it is in our community. But so many people are moving to Florida. And because the only way you can go into that museum, being a private museum, is when there's a charity event, a lot of people don't even know it's there. So what a great thing. So how do you get your tickets? You stop by Dr. Sheldon's office. You call Nancy at 321-473-7770. Say, I want my tickets. Or you go to helpingseniorscarraffle.com. You can get them there. Pop by any Boniface Hires dealership, and you're good to go. And then put that date on your calendar. You don't have to be present to win. You can always watch it by Facebook Live if you're, out and about. But boy, if you're in town, what a great night at the museum. So with that, Dr. Lee Sheldon, one more time, the number if somebody says, I want to do or hear about that Solid Bite Give Back thing.
321-259-8000.
All right. Well, thank you always for everything that you do in the community, for helping us and helping seniors. And thank you, listener, for joining us on Helping Seniors Radio. We are so grateful that you have made us part of your Wednesday routine. And we sure can't wait to see you again when we get down to next Wednesday. So every Wednesday, 12 noon, right here on 90.3 FM WEJF Radio. We will see you next week.